After winning tens of millions in the lottery, we resigned from our jobs and went to share the good news with our son and daughter. On a whim, we lied that we had a terminal illness. Unexpectedly, our despicable son and daughter actually drove us out of the house. Coincidentally, the apocalyptic flood came at that time and suddenly swept us away when we were wandering outside. I was on the verge of death among the piles of rotting corpses, while those two scoundrels were safe and sound. After being reborn with my husband, I swore to take revenge on those two ungrateful wretches. My husband won the lottery. A full 50 million. My husband and I immediately resigned. We planned to take our son and daughter back to our hometown to enjoy life. Having not seen our children for a long time, we suddenly wanted to give them a special surprise. So we made up a lie, saying that we had a terminal illness and only had half a year left to live. Who would have thought that those two heartless brutes immediately became cold and indifferent to us? They blocked the door and refused to let us in no matter what, as if they were afraid that we would stay and blackmail them. Just then, a flood swept in and swept us away when we were wandering outside. My husband died tragically in the flood, and so did our adopted daughter who came for us. I was soaked in the sewage, surrounded by rotten corpses, and some people were even gnawing on the floating corpses of dead animals. I was on the verge of death and hated those beasts who had abandoned us to the core. Fortunately, God gave us a chance to be reborn together. I don't believe that with the 50 million lottery winnings, we still can't live a good life. When I was reborn, I was lying in bed, sweating coldly all over. Honey, call me back quickly. I'll go pick Tina up first. You must wait for me at home and don't run around. Looking at the messages constantly sent by my husband on my mobile phone, I was almost scared out of my wits. It was sunny outside and the temperature was as high as 40 degrees, but I was shivering with cold. The chill of the flood seemed to have penetrated into my bones. I quickly rushed to the living room and adjusted the air conditioner temperature to 30 degrees, but I still felt chilly. Even when I collapsed on the sofa, I was freezing cold. I pulled the quilt from the bed and wrapped it around my body before I finally felt better. Looking at everything in front of me, I couldn't believe it. The family photo hanging on the wall and that calendar made me unable to hold back my excited tears. I was really reborn. Reborn on the day when my husband won 50 million. Reborn on the day before we went to see those despicable children. My mind was in a mess. I didn't know what I was thinking and directly ordered a bunch of food on my mobile phone. Barbecue, steak, fried rice with eggs, everything I could think of was ordered. Looking at the orders, I still felt it wasn't enough and bought enough meat and vegetables to fill the refrigerator. When my husband and Tina came back, I excitedly rushed up and hugged them. Tina looked at me blankly, but when she saw the table full of dishes, she said in surprise, "Mom, did something good happen? Why did you buy so much food?" I remembered that in my previous life, this sensible child immediately rushed over to say that she would support us as soon as she heard that we were in trouble. My eyes immediately became moist. I choked and said, "Nothing special. Mom just wants you to put on some weight. You'll look better when you're a bit fatter." Tina smiled and said that she would go to the kitchen to prepare the chopsticks and bowls. Only then did I notice that my husband had been silent since he entered the door. As soon as I looked up at him, he hugged me into his arms. "Winnie, are you okay?" my husband asked in a low voice. A hint of pain flashed in my husband's eyes. I hadn't realized what Victor meant by this sentence yet. He then muttered to himself, "This time we won't be deceived by those two brutes again. We'll just enjoy our good life at home." I instantly understood that he was also reborn. I hurriedly pushed his shoulder and asked excitedly, "Victor, are you also?" His confused eyes gradually became clear. We looked into each other's eyes. Suddenly, he laughed like a fool, picked me up and spun me around several times, shouting excitedly. Tina was amused by us in the living room and shouted, "Mom and Dad, you're so mushy." My face immediately turned red and I pushed Victor several times. "Stop it. The child is still here." This cheeky guy then put me down embarrassedly and turned around to clean up the dining table. The three of us in the family sat around the hot pot and ate happily together. During the whole meal, I don't know how many meaningful glances Victor and I exchanged. The joy of surviving the disaster and being able to be with the people we loved most filled our hearts. After Tina fell asleep, we sat down to carefully discuss our countermeasures. On this day in our previous life, the lottery ticket bought by Victor won 50 million. We were so happy that we were almost crazy and couldn't wait to tell the whole world. At that time, we were so silly that we thought of sharing this good news with those two ungrateful wretches. What we got in return was ruthless betrayal. Thinking of this, I was filled with anger. Those two bastards were really ungrateful wretches. Victor held my hand and said through gritted teeth, "Winnie, we can't be stupid this time. That 50 million is our life-saving money. We mustn't let those two unfilial children know about it." I nodded and said hatefully, "Yes. We were so stupid in our last life that we even wanted to share it with them." What was the result? As soon as those two scoundrels heard that we had a terminal illness, they even thought of sending us to a nursing home. Victor sighed and said, "I just wanted to test their filial piety, but those two brutes didn't even shed a single tear." I couldn't help scolding, "Don't mention it. What did that bastard Harry say?" "Dad, you'd better go to a nursing home. We don't have time to take care of you." Damn it. I was almost choked to death on the spot when I heard that. Those two bastards are really despicable. In this life, we will cherish Tina well. As for Harry and Wendy, those two heartless ones, sooner or later, we will make them regret it. We looked at each other and smiled, our hearts filled with expectations for the future and the pleasure of revenge. In the past, when my husband was doing business years ago, he was set up by his partners and almost went to prison. When we bought the house at first, we originally planned to put my name on it, but that ungrateful Harry jumped out to stop it. That brat said something like we young people weren't at home often and it would be troublesome if we had to go through formalities. Victor and I thought it made sense when we heard it, so we put the house under the names of our two children. Now when I think about it, those two wolf cubs probably had planned this long ago. However, those two fools don't know that nowadays, the law doesn't just depend on whose name is on the property certificate. The house wasn't bought in full. We just paid the down payment at that time, and the monthly mortgage was deducted from Victor's salary card. There's plenty of evidence in the bank. It won't be difficult to take back the house. It's just that it might be a bit troublesome to go to court. I looked at my husband, worried that this honest man would be soft-hearted again. Unexpectedly, this time he became tough. "From now on, our own little family is our home. What are those two ungrateful wretches?" Victor said through gritted teeth. I felt sad for him in my heart. After all these years, the father-son relationship was broken just like that. But then I thought, those two bastards don't deserve to be our children at all. "Victor, don't think about those useless things," I advised. "The most important thing now is..." Victor's face darkened and he took over my words. "Yes, the most important thing is our own family. In our previous life, because we were soft-hearted, we were almost swept away by the flood because of those two beasts. We will never make the same mistake again." He immediately sat up straight and began to make a list. This guy has always been good at dealing with data. In no time, he wrote dozens of pages of the preparation list. I wasn't idle either. When I thought of the deadly flood in my previous life, my heart pounded with fear. We must find a safer place quickly. That horrible weather almost drowned our whole family. We must find a safer place quickly. I remembered that there was a high-rise apartment upstairs for sale, and the owner was a warm-hearted young man. I quickly sent him a message and asked if the house was still for sale. The young man replied in seconds, "Sister Lou, do you want to buy a house?" I made up an excuse, saying that I had asked a fortune teller to tell my fortune and that the feng shui on this floor was not good and I wanted to move to another place. After making an appointment to see the house tomorrow, I contacted the decoration team and prepared to reinforce the doors and windows and install waterproof devices. I don't want to experience the feeling of being almost swept away by the water again. After finishing these things, I moved closer to Victor and caught a glimpse of Wendy's WeChat moments on his phone. That ungrateful wretch was standing with her brother, smiling like a flower, and the caption read, "My dearest parents." There was also a picture below, which was the red envelopes we sent them. Sure enough, as long as we gave them money, we were their dearest parents. Victor's eyes turned red when he saw it. He quickly locked the screen and forced out a smile that was uglier than crying at me. It's okay. I felt a pang of pain in my heart. After all, these were the children we had raised for decades. It was impossible to say that we didn't care. I silently hugged him and gave him some time to calm down. Looking at the brightly lit city outside the window, I sneered in my heart, just wait. You heartless things. When the flood comes, I'll make you taste what it's like to be worse than death. I sent a message to Wendy and tested her. Wendy, the weather has been bad recently. Could you buy some waterproof and moisture-proof things for Mom? It took her a long time to reply with a perfunctory okay. I added, try to be quick. Mom needs them recently. Wendy immediately sent a voice message, speaking in a strange tone. Mom, what are you doing? If you empty my wallet, what will my brother and I spend? I was almost angered into laughter when I heard that. Heartless thing. In our previous life, she couldn't wait for us to die, to be killed by the flood, so that they could have the house all to themselves. She was really shameless to the extreme. Without a word, I transferred 3,000 yuan to her. This time, she received it in seconds. Oh, she was really greedy for money and couldn't wait for even a minute. I sneered and thought, take it slow. I'd like to see how long you ungrateful wretches can keep up the act. When the flood comes, I'll see if you can still smile. Thinking of this, I suddenly had an idea. Since these two wolf cubs like to pretend so much, then I would accompany them to put on a good show. I turned to my husband and said, Victor, I have an idea. Let's. My husband nodded knowingly. We told that pair of children that we had a terminal illness. Victor and I didn't go to bed until very late. We not only placed orders for a large quantity of supplies in the supermarket but also bought many things for self-defense and to prevent drowning. During times of such natural disasters and man-made calamities, the most terrifying thing is not the flood but people's hearts. If those two ungrateful wretches knew that we had won the lottery jackpot, there's no telling what despicable things they might do. The next day, I struggled to get up and went to view the apartment. I was quite satisfied with every aspect of it. I immediately called in the construction team to start the renovation. I gave the young man who was selling the house an extra 30,000 yuan, hoping that he could move out today. After receiving the money, he just thought that I was superstitious because of what the fortune teller had said. We rushed to the real estate center to handle the formalities. I paid him the full amount in cash. I watched as he was about to run to the hospital after getting the money. I couldn't help but remind him, I have someone working in the meteorological bureau in my family. They said there might be a heavy rainstorm in a couple of days. Be careful not to get trapped. He smiled at me energetically, with joy and hope in his eyes. That was all I could do. As soon as I got home, the workers were moving things in and out, and Victor was also constantly busy. Tina was sitting in the living room, looking at our busy figures with a puzzled expression on her face. Seeing me come back, she stood up and asked, Mom, what's going on? Why are we moving all of a sudden? I took her hand and said gently, Tina, we want to spend more time with you. Don't go to work during this period. Will you stay with us? Tina still looked confused, but she nodded anyway. Okay, I'll ask for a few days off tomorrow. But Mom, did something happen to you? I shook my head and forced a smile. Nothing. I just want to spend more time with you. Go and pack up. We'll move into our new home tonight. I paid triple the price to ask the workers who were installing the waterproof equipment and reinforcing the doors and windows to finish everything today. These guys were really slow at their work. If we hadn't paid them readily, it would probably have taken them months to complete the job. By the time they finished the decoration, the flood would have already passed. After seeing them off, my husband quietly came close to my ear and said, Honey, the supplies we purchased yesterday are downstairs. Should we move them up? I thought for 2 or 3 seconds, took out my mobile phone and hired a housekeeper to clean this floor's rooms, preparing to move in tonight. Then our family went back to the 17th floor and started to sort out the supplies and check for any omissions or deficiencies. After counting the fruits, vegetables, meat, instant food that we had bought, as well as various waterproof and life-saving tools, I ordered 2 large refrigerators and placed orders for several high-capacity power banks. After doing all this, it still wasn't enough. I also installed surveillance cameras in front of and inside the rooms on the 17th floor and locked the doors and windows tightly. In order not to arouse suspicion, my husband and I decided to move the supplies upstairs bit by bit in the middle of the night. Everything was ready except for the east wind. It wasn't until the sky was completely bright that the two of us were so tired that we collapsed on the sofa. I was woken up by the sound of my husband and Harry shouting at each other. "Why should I pay 300,000 yuan just because you want to buy a car? Are you out of your mind? You're living in the house and still asking me to buy you a car." Victor's voice was trembling with anger as he had his back to me. Victor had his phone's volume turned up quite loud, and I could hear Wendy grabbing the phone on the other end. Later, she shrieked in a shrill voice, "Dad! What do you mean by this? We are your children. We are a family. What's wrong with you helping your brother? If you sell your car, brother can buy one. You're both sick. What's the point of keeping the money? Dad, if you don't transfer the money to us within 2 days, I'll go and make a scene at your company. Let's see if you still care about your reputation." Victor sneered, "You two ungrateful wretches. I'll take back that house sooner or later. As for buying a car, forget about it." After saying that, he hung up the phone. I watched as this usually tough man crouched down and curled himself up into a ball. I felt so sad in my heart. I stepped forward, snatched his phone and blocked and deleted Harry and Wendy in one go. I did the same on my phone. Immediately after that, I took out the mobile phone number that I had just created and sent Harry a text message about a loan. I didn't know whether Harry, that traitorous dog, was really going to buy a car or not. But given his character, he would definitely borrow this sum of money. This wasn't the first time. Hadn't this brute lost a lot of money gambling and in the stock market? How many times had my husband cleaned up his mess? It was all just an act of playing the victim. The brother and sister worked in tandem, coming to us and begging as if they were mourning at a grave, saying that they would be filial to us in the future. Victor had always been soft-hearted and cleaned up their mess for them. But I knew that this time, we definitely couldn't be soft-hearted again. Sure enough, Harry contacted me that very afternoon, saying that he wanted to borrow 300,000 yuan. Without a word, I sent him a loan link. I had someone make this loan link. On the surface, it looked proper. But the traps in it were enough to give this fool a hard time. I believed that Harry, that fool, definitely hadn't read the contract carefully and must have thought that we would cover for him no matter what happened. Oh, just wait and see. Looking at the 300,000 yuan deducted from the bank card, I knew that Harry, that good son, would come to pester my husband again soon. I told Victor about this. He looked at me hesitantly. I squeezed his palm and said, "Don't be afraid. Let's just wait and watch the show." 1 week later, Harry blocked and deleted me. I had expected him to do this, and I had already prepared a backup plan. I contacted a local ruffian I knew from my previous job and asked him to help me put on a show of coming to collect debts. I said, "Just use your best skills. The harsher, the better. I'll pay for it." At first, this guy pretended to hesitate. Without saying a word, I directly transferred 20,000 yuan to him. Sure enough, he immediately became energetic. Half an hour later, he sent me a photo, and it was right in front of Harry's house. I sneered in my heart. Money is really a good thing. You can do anything with it. Before long, Victor's phone rang. We looked at each other and answered the phone. It was as chaotic as a vegetable market on the other end. Harry was crying and shouting on the other end, and Wendy was screaming as if she were being slaughtered. There was also a male voice that came out of nowhere, cursing and saying that Harry was a liar. Several voices mixed together, and finally, we heard Harry wailing loudly, "Dad, you have to help me this time. He said that if I can't pay back the money, he'll break my legs. The expression on Victor's face instantly turned as cold as ice, and his voice was filled with bone-chilling coldness. I won't pay back the money for you, and you don't even think about defaulting on the money I lent you before. The people on the other end were obviously dumbfounded. Harry's voice suddenly rose, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Victor. What the hell do you mean? I'm your own son. You won't save me when I'm in trouble. Are you even human? Wendy also shrieked on the other end of the phone. Victor. If you don't pay this money today, you're not our dad. Hearing this, I glanced at Victor, worried that he would hesitate because of feeling bad. But this time, he was tough and sneered. If I were the one in debt today, would you do this for me? Dream on. Hearing this, Wendy immediately changed her expression and cried weakly, Dad. We're your relatives. Won't we still depend on each other in the future? Mom. Are you there? Hurry up and persuade Dad. I almost burst out laughing when I heard this. These despicable children usually ignored me when they thought I didn't have much money, but now they remembered me. Suddenly, I had an idea. I slapped my hand hard against something and shouted into the phone, Victor, why are you hitting me? Victor looked at me blankly. I quickly made a gesture to keep quiet, then groaned ouch, ouch a few times and hung up the phone. Victor came to his senses and touched my face affectionately. Honey, how could I bear to hit you? I gave him a sly smile. Silly, I just slapped my own hand just now. We looked at each other and laughed, hugging each other and laughing so hard that we could hardly stand up. I sent another message to that ruffian boss. Teach that Victor a lesson and make sure he can't get out of bed for at least half a month. After saying that, I transferred another 50,000 yuan to him. This scoundrel was quite efficient in handling things. Before long, he sent me a photo. I saw that Harry's face, which deserved a beating, was black and blue, and his arm was a bit deformed. I felt really satisfied when I saw it, but I didn't show it to Victor. Actually, there was a reason why I hated Harry so much. This brute almost beat me to death back then. I had always kept this matter in my heart and didn't dare to tell anyone. That night, my husband rushed back to the company overnight because of work. I wasn't able to move around conveniently, so I didn't go with him. It was pouring rain that night. That dog Harry was drunk and took a kitchen knife. I was so scared that my soul almost flew away and I screamed desperately. That brute, drunk as he was, asked me to give him some money and kept approaching me step by step. Finally, I picked up a photo frame and hit him until he bled, and then he left. At that time, I always comforted myself that it was because my son was drunk. Now I realized that it was not strange at all for him to do such a thing. Thinking of that rainy night back then, I still felt scared even now. Just as I was thinking, I suddenly noticed that it started to rain outside. I woke up with a start. Wasn't the flood in my previous life started by a heavy rainstorm? I quickly opened the weather forecast app and saw that there would be a heavy rainstorm in 2 hours. Could it be that the flood was coming earlier? Without a word, I grabbed Victor and Tina and quickly moved from the 17th floor to the 30th floor. Sure enough, before long, the heavy rainstorm began. At first, people were quite happy, saying that it could relieve the sweltering heat of summer. All kinds of media rushed to report this timely rain. Only I knew that this rain was likely to last for more than a month. And the rainfall would become heavier and heavier. By then, the whole city would be turned into a vast expanse of water. 3 days and 3 nights passed, and the rain was falling harder and harder. At this time, finally someone noticed that something was wrong. Heavy rainstorm in July, natural disaster, the end of the world is coming, I don't want to die. These terrifying topics dominated the hot search list, and the outside world was in chaos. However, the 3 of us in our family were eating hot pot leisurely at home. Looking at the pouring rain outside the window, it seemed that we were cut off from the rest of the world. At first, Harry and Wendy, those 2 ungrateful wretches, kept bombarding us with various phone numbers. They used both threats and pleas. Their combination of tough and soft tactics made me feel so disgusted that I almost vomited. However, after the heavy rain had been falling for a few days, they finally quieted down. I sneered and thought, I guess they found that there wasn't even a decent bite to eat at home and were starving? They deserved it. Thinking of this, I suddenly remembered something and quickly took out my mobile phone and found a mobile app that hadn't been used for a long time. I almost forgot about this. Previously, Wendy fainted at home because of the recurrence of the after effects of an operation. If the neighbor hadn't happened to find her, she might have been dead by now. After that, my husband installed surveillance cameras in their home, saying it was just in case. This app was downloaded at that time, and now the membership had expired. Without a word, I renewed the membership for a year. After waiting for a few seconds, the video images were transmitted. Unexpectedly, besides those two ungrateful wretches in the living room, there was also someone who surprised me. It was Fiona, Harry's junior high school classmate. Speaking of this Fiona, I got angry. This person was a typical bully at school, proficient in fighting, isolating others, and bullying. Originally, we had nothing to do with each other until one day, Tina accidentally bumped into her discussing which little hooligan was the most handsome with her little girlfriends in the toilet. Without a word, she was about to slap Tina in the face. Fortunately, Tina grew up in an orphanage since childhood and was later adopted by us. As a result, this woman not only didn't succeed but also lost face in front of her little girlfriends. Since then, this crazy woman had been at odds with Tina and had set many obstacles for her in 3 years. She used all the mean tricks she could think of, such as spreading rumors, stealing exam papers, and pouring paint on my seat. Her father was some kind of official in the town, while Tina was an orphan, so naturally no one dared to help her. Until later, Tina was adopted, and we made efforts to negotiate, and that woman finally gave up. After that, Tina was admitted to the key high school in the city, and she went to a shabby vocational school in the town, and that was the end of the matter. I really didn't expect to see her again in this way. I was wondering how she could appear in Victor's house when the conversation among several people gave me the answer. I don't know what was said on the other end of the phone. I don't know what was said on the other end of the phone. Fiona suddenly stopped crying, hung up the phone and started yelling at Harry, "You liar whose whole family should die. Wait until my dad comes to deal with you. You'll be in for it." Harry looked like a dead dog at this moment, curled up on the sofa with bandages on his hands. Although this brute didn't look energetic, he was still unforgiving with his words. "You stinking bitch, what right do you have to scold me? If it weren't for your family asking for 300,000 yuan as betrothal gifts, would I have ended up like this?" Apparently, Fiona didn't expect him to say that and immediately jumped up and threw a tantrum. "Harry, don't you have any shame? What kind of rich person were you pretending to be outside? So you were just putting on airs?" I almost burst out laughing when I heard this. No matter what, Fiona's family was a petty bourgeois family. How could she possibly take a fancy to Harry? So he had packaged himself as a rich second generation outside. Haha, a leopard can't change its spots. Fiona was still cursing and swearing. Suddenly, a figure flashed in the surveillance video and slapped Fiona with a loud smack. "You shameless little slut. How dare you curse me and my brother?" Wendy scolded in a shrill voice. She looked exactly like a shrew. I was so shocked that I was dumbfounded. Wendy's slap was really hard. Fiona could hardly stand still and staggered several times. How could Fiona endure such humiliation? She immediately started scuffling with Wendy on the spot. When the two women fought, the scene was in a terrible mess. However, Wendy was a few years older after all and was clearly better at fighting. She grabbed Fiona's hair and pressed her to the ground. "You shrew! Just wait until my dad comes to see how he'll deal with you." Fiona howled while struggling. "Harry, are you blind? Don't you care that your sister is beating me?" Harry had just been humiliated by Fiona and was feeling unhappy in his heart. Seeing this scene, he actually laughed instead. "Who do you think you are? If you've got the guts, ask your dad to come and beat me up." Wendy was also unwilling to show weakness. "It's pouring rain outside. Just cry here. You still dare to stay in my house? You shameless slut." Look at what you've done to my brother. Your Victor family are the shameless ones. Look at your brother's behavior. Bah! Fiona was still being stubborn. I shook my head as I watched. Fiona's bad temper still hadn't changed. She was still so sharp-tongued at a time like this. I really didn't know if she was stupid. How dare she run wild in other people's territory under such circumstances? Wasn't she just asking for trouble? Sure enough, Wendy swung her fist and punched Fiona in the stomach. You shameless bitch. You still dared to ask for 300,000 yuan as betrothal gifts? Get out of here. Fiona suffered a lot this time. She was beaten and curled up into a ball, her face as pale as death. It seemed that she was really in pain. Seeing this situation, an alarm suddenly went off in my heart. If someone died, it would be hard to end this matter. I quickly turned on the screen recording function on my mobile phone and recorded everything. Wendy was still hitting and scolding there. Seeing that Fiona was in so much pain that she couldn't even speak, Wendy became even more energetic. Stop pretending. Weren't you quite capable just now? Running wild in my house. I'll beat you to death, you slut. I watched this absurd scene and felt very uneasy in my heart. These two lunatics, I really didn't know what they would do. Just as I was about to turn off the screen recording and exit, suddenly I saw that there was a new change in the picture. Suddenly, I saw that Fiona was bleeding under her body. Oh my God, this was no joke. Being punched a few times would at most make one lie in bed with bruises all over the body. But looking at Fiona like this, there was an 80% chance that she was pregnant. Seeing the blood constantly gushing out from under Fiona in the surveillance video, Wendy and Harry were also dumbfounded. Wendy's arrogant look disappeared immediately. She quickly crouched down to check the situation and shouted in horror, You're pregnant? As soon as these words came out, Harry seemed to have been hit with a stick and instantly jumped up from the sofa. Fiona, are you really pregnant? The two of them just stared blankly at Fiona, waiting for her to answer. Fiona lay weakly on the ground, her voice as faint as a mosquito's. Yes. The doctor said it's a little boy. When Wendy heard this, her eyes almost popped out. Why didn't you say so earlier? When Harry heard this news, his face turned green. He pointed at Wendy and cursed, You shrew. Why did you have to hit her? All of you are money losers. I finally have a son. Do you want to cut off the descendants of our Victor family? Wendy also knew that she had caused a big disaster and regretted it so much that she shed tears and didn't dare to say another word. When I heard them say that Tina was a money loser, my anger flared up at once. When we adopted Tina, they still pretended to be caring siblings and took care of her pretentiously. Now when I think about it, these two brutes probably had held grudges against us long ago. Harry reacted the most strongly. He stared at the pool of blood on the ground and muttered to himself as if he had lost his soul, Son? My son. Then, this bastard suddenly rushed forward, trying to help Fiona up. Wendy was pushed by him and staggered, hitting the TV cabinet. The back of her head hit the sharp corner of the cabinet and she cried out in pain, Ouch! But how could Harry care about her at this moment? Now there was only Fiona and the child in her belly in his eyes. I felt a pang in my heart. Wendy had just had a brain operation some time ago. This knock definitely wouldn't be a good thing. Sure enough, at first Wendy could still groan a few times, but soon she fell to the ground and didn't move at all. I quickly called Victor over. When he saw the situation in the surveillance video, he didn't say a word and immediately called Harry. Looking at the chaotic home in the picture, I also felt bad in my heart. However, I didn't expect that as soon as the call was connected, Harry went crazy and roared into the phone, Dad! You were actually spying on me? If you hadn't refused to give me money, would I have borrowed usury? You're both terminally ill. What's wrong with giving me some money? Don't you want to leave the money to that adopted daughter? Just wait. You were spying on me. Were you deliberately watching my jokes? As he said that, he rushed to the front of the surveillance camera. That ferocious face instantly filled my mobile phone screen. He cursed with a grimace and yanked off the surveillance camera. The picture on my side immediately became a mess and soon showed that the connection failed. I quickly turned off the screen recording and ran to comfort my husband. He curled up on the sofa, hugging his knees and kept muttering to himself, "He's my own son that I've raised since he was a child. How could he become like this?" I held him in my arms affectionately. At this time, Tina also ran over and said sensibly, "Dad, don't be sad. I'll support you in the future." Victor raised his head with red eyes, and the three of us in the family hugged each other tightly. I comforted him softly, "Don't be sad. Everything will pass. It's okay as long as the three of us are together." Looking at Victor's haggard appearance, I also felt bad in my heart. Those two ungrateful wretches. If I had known it would turn out like this, I shouldn't have given birth to them in the first place. I clenched my fists tightly with hatred. Time passed quickly. This heavy rainstorm came so suddenly, and in the blink of an eye, it had been falling for almost 2 months. Many people were half dead because they didn't have any stored food at home and were tortured by this natural disaster. However, the rain was getting lighter day by day now, and everyone was looking forward to the end of this heavy rainstorm. On this day, the long silent owners group suddenly became very lively. I clicked in to take a look and almost dropped my mobile phone. The owner on the 3rd floor posted a photo, and on it were clearly Wendy and Harry. I could hardly recognize the two people in this photo. Wendy was as thin as a bamboo pole. The back of her head seemed to have been bandaged, and she looked like a skeleton. Harry had one hand wrapped in thick gauze, with blood stains on it. These two people now looked as wretched as beggars. There was no trace of their previous pampered appearance at home. The owner on the 4th floor then sent a message, "Whose family are these? They've been lingering at my door for several days. Come and take them away quickly." This message was like a bomb and instantly set off the whole group. I was so nervous that I didn't dare to breathe loudly, for fear of being recognized. At this time, an owner on the 16th floor said, "I remember that the family on the 17th floor seemed to have a son and a daughter before." Someone from another floor followed up and said, "There are many families with children. We can't just be so sure about it, right?" Another owner suddenly at the owner on the 16th floor, "Yes, I remember too. I met them before. It should be the family on the 17th floor." The owner on the 4th floor immediately at me and Victor, "Come and take your family members away. Don't cause trouble for us here." Only then did I remember that Victor and I hadn't changed our group nicknames yet. Just as I didn't know how to respond, the young man who sold us the house suddenly said, "They sold the house early and moved away." I quickly sent him a private message, "Please don't mention our new address in the group." The young man said it was okay and also sent a message saying, "Thanks. Thanks to sister's reminder, otherwise I would have suffered a lot during this period." I hastily replied, "You're welcome," and quickly went to check the activity in the group. Other residents also said that indeed no one had lived on the 17th floor for the past 2 months. The owner on the 3rd floor was obviously impatient. "Whether it's them or not, I've already told them to go to the 17th floor to look for them just now." Seeing this message, my heart suddenly jumped into my throat. Fortunately, I had been careful before. Otherwise, if I were really pestered by these two despicable children, it would be a big trouble. However, thinking about how Fiona was bleeding under her body in the surveillance video last time, suddenly, a bad premonition rose in my heart. I quickly opened the video doorbell on the 17th floor. I saw Harry's face frantically pounding on the door, shouting, "Dad! My sister and I have come to find you. Open the door quickly." I turned up the volume to the maximum. Victor heard it and rushed over hurriedly. I thought he would have some reaction, but unexpectedly, this guy just took a casual glance and said, "Ignore them." I listened to him and turned off my mobile phone, but I still felt uneasy in my heart, for fear that something might go wrong. The next morning, when I got up and took a look, they were already gone. I wondered how on earth they had managed to come here from other places when it was so dangerous outside. Just as I was thinking, Victor suddenly hugged me from behind. "Honey, don't think about those unnecessary things. Let's just live our own good life." I turned around and looked at his haggard face, feeling sad in my heart. Even though I hated them, it was still hard to bear seeing the children we had raised with so much effort turn out like this. Victor, I hugged him tightly, don't be sad. Those two ungrateful wretches aren't worth your sadness. We still have Tina. We are the real family. Victor nodded with red eyes and suddenly said, Honey, I'm thinking, should we call the police? I was stunned. Call the police? Why? Don't you remember? Last time in the surveillance video. Wendy and Fiona. Victor hesitated to say more. I was shocked. Yes. I almost forgot about that. If someone really died, it would be no joke. Before we could come up with a solution, the heavy rainstorm suddenly stopped, as if God was playing a joke on humans. As the flood slowly receded, people cheered and rejoiced. This lifeless city finally regained its vitality. Although there was still a lot of stored food at home, after being locked up at home for so long, the three of us in the family were almost going crazy. On the third day after confirming it was safe, we decided to go out and get some fresh air. There were people coming and going on the street, and it was very lively. Everyone was celebrating the end of this damn heavy rainstorm. We also came to the shopping mall, ready to have a nice meal. Unfortunately, things didn't go as we wished. We ran into Harry in the shopping mall. Harry looked even more miserable than a beggar now. His hair was like a mess of a chicken coop, his face was unshaven, and he was dirty all over, just like a beggar. As soon as Victor saw him, he wanted to pull us away. But as soon as he saw us, he ran even faster than a rabbit and rushed in front of us in an instant. Dad! You've finally shown up, huh? Do you know how much my sister and I have suffered? Harry roared at us like a mad dog. Victor frowned and pushed him away forcefully. Get lost. I don't know you. Harry's eyes instantly turned red, as if they were spitting fire. Seeing more and more people gathering around to watch the fun, this bastard rolled his eyes and suddenly sat on the ground, wailing loudly. This scoundrel was really good at acting. He cried and cursed at the camera lenses of the people around. It's this heartless family. Our mother brought up my sister and me with great painstaking efforts, while our father is living a good life with his mistress. I'm useless. During the heavy rainstorm, we were almost starving to death at home, but he was out there enjoying himself. I begged him to bring us some food so that our family could survive. But he was so heartless that he blocked me directly. Hearing this, Victor trembled with anger and asked in disbelief, Don't talk nonsense. Seeing that his act was working, Harry became even more energetic. He pointed at Victor's nose and cursed, What are you pretending for now? We came all the way here. Do you know how much hardship we've endured? But you were so cruel that you shut us out, and it cost my sister. As he said this, Harry's voice suddenly rose and became terribly distorted. It caused my sister to starve to death. Hearing this, Victor began to pant heavily. After all, that was his daughter. Impossible. You're talking bullshit. I saw more and more people gathering around, with their mobile phone cameras constantly filming us. I quickly took out my mobile phone to call the police and also started recording. Oh, just because you say it's impossible doesn't mean it is. Harry sneered, This hand of mine got soaked and infected by the rain on the road. That's why. The more he talked, the more pitiful he felt himself to be, as if he even believed it himself. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, How shameless this family of three is. Immediately after that, accusations against us came from all directions. Tina was terribly frightened and wanted to pull us away first. Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Harry immediately stood up, with a big smile on his face, and stretched out his hand towards us, saying, Give me money. I sneered, Harry, you're getting better and better at distorting the truth. Do you really think we have no evidence? Harry was clearly feeling guilty and swallowed hard. However, seeing that the people around supported him, Harry became bolder again. What's there to investigate? You didn't give us money back then, which led to the accident of my sister and me. How could it be investigated? I sneered again, bullshit. We transferred money to your accounts 1,000 or 2,000 at a time. And you still say there was none. You owed usury yourself and wanted your dad to clean up your mess. Why don't you just go to hell? Hearing this, the people around started whispering less. Harry panicked and threatened me in a low voice. Can't we just part on good terms? Mom, Dad, I just want some money to save my life. I was just about to speak when Victor pulled me and Tina behind him and reprimanded angrily. Harry, have some conscience. Back then, you two teamed up to hide it from me and snatched the house away. I didn't say anything. After hearing that we had a terminal illness, not only did you not care, but you became even more greedy for money. How many times have I cleaned up your mess? Did you ever really regard me as your father? The onlookers gasped when they heard this. So that's how it is. How could this person be so shameless? But there were still some people speaking for Harry, but when he went to find his parents, they really didn't open the door. Hearing this, Harry became more energetic. Yeah. Why didn't you open the door when we went to your house? I sneered. Bullshit. We had already moved. There was no one living in that place at all. Harry was about to say something when suddenly the sound of police sirens rang out. Hearing this bastard was about to run away. Victor grabbed him tightly. Don't run. Go and explain it to the police. The police arrived at the scene. This incident caused a big stir and it took a long time to settle down. Later, we learned that Harry had committed several murders and his methods were extremely cruel. Finally, he was sentenced to death. He deserved it. The video of that day in the mall was uploaded online, and Harry became famous all of a sudden, but in a notorious way. After the court's judgment was announced, the internet exploded and there were a flood of curses. Fiona's mother also tried to get attention, complaining online all day long about how Harry had done evil deeds. Later, I learned that on that day, when Fiona called her father really risked the heavy rain to pick her up. Who knew that the rain was so heavy on the road that he slipped and fell? After finally arriving at Harry's house, he was pushed by Harry in a fit of anger and died unexpectedly. Seeing that the man was dead, Harry went all the way and suffocated Fiona to death. Later, because of hunger, he even ate the bodies of the father and daughter as food. Hearing this, my husband and I were both horrified. Unexpectedly, when we thought about the time when our son had cursed at us before, he had already eaten 2 people. If we hadn't been on the street, I don't know what would have happened to my husband and me. As for our daughter, she had just managed to hold on after being injured. Just as Harry said, she passed away after leaving our home that day. But when we heard about it, we just felt a sense of pity. My husband and I had had enough of this place that had brought us so much pain. So we sold our old family house and moved directly to a small town inland. Now we are living an extremely comfortable life. Later, Tina used the money we won in the lottery as startup capital and became a well-known female entrepreneur. Her father and I are both proud of her when we see this. Sometimes when we wake up in the middle of the night, Victor and I will still talk about what happened back then. To be honest, if we hadn't experienced it ourselves, neither of us would have believed that such a melodramatic plot could happen to us. However, it was precisely because of this opportunity that our family of 3 can live the kind of plain and happy life we have now. Those 2 ungrateful wretches? We had long forgotten about them. Remembering these 2 despicable children would only make us feel miserable for no reason. Who cares what happened to them? From now on, we only have our daughter Tina. It's the right thing for our family of 3 to live a good life together. The end.